So what we're going to do is we're going to use Radical as a dog fooding internally. We're going to use
Brilliant.
generate our own code and we're going to deploy. So that's how we are envisioning. So you're right. So for the subsequent things, it's going to bring it down.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Top of the Hunt. Today we've got Senthil with us, who's created Radical.sh, recently featured on Product Hunt. And from that time, he's going to discuss his journey so far, how he came up with the idea, where it comes from, his background, and then his plans for the future. So I'll pass it over to you, Senthil. Would you like to introduce yourself,
Yeah,
please?
thanks, Darren. Myself, Senthil. So I have got around 14 years of experience in IT industry. So primarily working for a e-commerce based product company as a staff machine learning engineer. So I primarily built search systems and few of the ML ops platform components for my company. As a sidekick, I started working on Radical.sh. So primarily, what is Radical.sh is it's an API builder. So it generates code for a complete API, the starting parts of the API around 50 to 60% of the source code.
So your background, 14 years working in e-commerce, and you've been working in AI and ML for how long?
So I've switched across like four companies. I started with a service-based company, then I switched to a e-commerce-based company, and then I went to a chatbot-related company, and again back to a e-commerce-based company. That's like around 14 years of experience throughout my career.
So if I'm coming along and let's say I'm a junior dev, what does Radical SH do for me?
Like you mentioned, having worked upon a lot of backend systems, a lot of APIs have built across over the period of time. These are all domain driven microservices. So when microservice became popular, so we wanted to carve out a lot of smaller functionality into their own microservices. So what this resulted in was that each of the services would take some amount of time to build this, the basic layer, and then the developer is going to get access custom stuff that is logic related to that microservice. And what we realized over a period of time is that although microservice journey is very good to maintain in long run, but to get started, it's a very costly affair. Microservices are. So we came up with a Radical.sh. What we came up with is how can we give a jump start into that microservices journey. So having built several microservices, we felt like there is a amount of common code which exists across our microservices. So if you take 80-20
Mhm.
principles, so 20% of the code used 80% of times. What if we can generate this 20% of code upfront for a developer?
Mhm.
And then this is going to cover the 80% of his use case around that service. Now, all he's going to write is the remaining 20%. So that's our aim. So to ability to generate this 80% of code by writing just 20% of building blocks in the industry.
I understand that it's like in marketing. Obviously, everybody has they're going to have to look at the target customer persona. They need to look at different things, and that process, generally speaking, is relatively the same for a large company or a small company. You still have to go and tick certain boxes. So yeah, it's from there. Is a platform applicable primarily to AI to ML? Can somebody use it with different programming languages, or is there any restrictions for
Okay.
somebody?
So we today primarily generate code base for two languages, that is Java with Spring Boot and Nest.js with TypeScript. This is targeting Node ecosystem. So this is not a AI-driven component as such built in. It is written with a proprietary spec. It's based out of a reverse reflection technique where given a spec, we can generate a language code. We have written generators for a couple of languages. If we want to generate more languages, the spec remains the same. We can generate more languages. Why we do this way is that if a product or a tool can generate a code which is production ready and it's going to work
Mhm.
as soon as you configure it and download it, if it is production ready, then you have a confidence that it's going to always work. And for building this 20% of blocks, you may not even need AI. You can get it generated in a programmatic way. Once that gets generated, developers can use AI based Copilot or ChatGPT on top of this code to enhance it further. So what we have seen is that it is easy to convert the code from one language to other language using AI rather than writing so many prompts to convey something to generate that class itself. So at Radical, we generate one class. So if you say that no, I don't want this framework to be used, generate a different framework. You can call it out in our Copilot or ChatGPT. It's going to convert it, and the conversion is going to be much accurate than you writing it from scratch.
Okay. So obviously from there, I come along, I'm a junior developer, I want to use your
Yeah.
tool. What would the estimated time saving be on like a I know it's asking a project size is like asking a piece of string, but you must have a little bit of an idea of the average project size people use it for. How much time would they save?
So it depends on project to project. So we have experimented with few of the
Mm,
use cases that we have built in past, and what we have come across the customers. So what we can say is that it's going to
okay.
save around 30 to 60 percentage of effort, depending on whether the pattern what they are developing falls into the pattern that we have already completed. It may be, if it is somewhere down in the roadmap, they have to might have to code it manually. But if it falls into that bucket, obviously while starting a microservice journey, you will start with like setting up the basic skeleton, and then writing the CRUD operations, then writing unit test, integration test. All of this we take care at one level. So what we see is that 30 to 60 percentage of time savings you will get it. So if you get your domain driven designs right, it is definitely going to save more than 40 percentage of time for sure.
That's an incredible save. And obviously, it's when you look at the cost of a developer, even if you're developing the tool yourself, like you, so that, for example, you've taken quite a bit of time to build this because it's been you're working
Yeah,
part time. So if you were to reuse it for what you were doing
yeah,
now, you might have taken 2 years and done it in like a year and a
yeah.
half or less than a year.
Maybe if you had been working full time, then it would have been maybe a 6 month story, because when you're focusing on some things, the time reduces drastically. So while you do it as your sidekick, you get a context switching, and obviously that has a implication on focus. That's why we had a bigger timeline.
Oh no! So what I was meaning was, if you were to recreate your project, if you could use the tool you just
Yeah,
made, you might have been able to save that time anyway. So as
yeah,
two developers working on the
yeah. So
project, 60% saving on 2 years is a massive time saving, isn't it? It
so
enables somebody who's working part time to look more full time in time frame.
yeah, in order to clarify that question, right? So the parts that we have built in today has very limited portions for APA. It has got a lot of portions for generating code. Now for the subsequent roadmap items, we need APIs for own purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to
Mhm.
use Radical as a dog fooding internally. We're going to use
Yeah.
generate our own code, and we're going to deploy. So that's how we are envisioning. So you're right. So for the subsequent things, it's going to bring it down.
That's fantastic, because my co-founder, he often talks about dog fooding, and it's a strange concept. And when you get used to the idea of actually it's not a pauper thing, you can't afford to eat it, but if you get eating your own dog food, it means one, the product's going to be robust, and then two, people are in a position where you've probably encountered most of the situations and use cases already, so there's no surprises. So I think it's very valuable advice for
Yeah,
anybody. Make sure you're dog fooding, and if you're not dog fooding, if you can't use it
exactly.
yourself, then you need to question if it's actually a tool that you could develop and
Definitely.
sell. From there, obviously, you've taken, was it 2 years you said to build the
Yeah,
full thing? How have you managed to, and the word you used was content switching or contact switching?
context switching.
Contact. So, how's that worked in your
Yeah.
head? Is it been difficult? Have you known how to do it, or is it the first time you tried to do
No,
that?
I've been building sidekicks for a long time. So it's not a difficult thing when it comes to spending some part of my career to do this. So that part is fine. But with Radical, we had to put a lot of emphasis on the specification, because if we get the specification wrong, it's going to work for one language, it may not work for other language. So it becomes tricky. So with
Mm.
Radical, I've got a couple of more developers who have been doing part time. So they have been focusing on implementation, so that I get a little bit of time on to do the design of how it works, how it has to work eventually for other components as well. And also I do hands-on coding for few difficult modules. So how we spend time is that so Saturdays we work like full day as a full day office stuff, and on weekdays we spend a little more time. So that's how the journey goes. Like weekday, each day we take like around 2 hours of our time, and then that's how we are able to put in around 20 hours a week, and then we build it.
It's interesting because I know 20 hours a week plus 40 hours a week is 60-hour week, if not more. Do you know? Because I know developers, from my experience, have often underestimated how much time they've actually spent on their own projects because they enjoy debugging and fixing some of those
Yeah,
things. So it's interesting that you've been able to manage it
yeah.
so well. So is it a team? You've mentioned we. So is that one, two, three, five other
So
people in
far
you?
we have got three people. Along with me, we have got two more developers who are working on it.
And they're all local to you, or is it a remote team?
Yeah, so they are based out of Bangalore, so they're local.
Yeah. So did you still do remote, or do you like meet up and work in like a hackathon type
Yeah,
set?
this hackathon type of thing we do when, let's say, we are kickstarting a module. It's brand new, so that's where the face-to-face interactions, doing a whiteboarding and interacting with them, is actually very helpful. So that time we stress upon getting together in a co-working space and then spending some time and getting it right. Eventually when we close out what has to be done, then the how part, eventually they pick, every developer picks up their own thing and they work on a remote part, so that part goes smooth. So only during the kickstart of a new module, or when we stuck on a problem, so that's where we see like face-to-face interactions.
It's interesting 'cause I've seen a few posts recently on social media talking about the success of a few companies where they started in a garage, and obviously back in, you take it back to Apple perhaps, and
Yeah.
Microsoft, they started in somebody's garage and then they develop and end up having a team that outgrows it. Obviously in today's world it's very different. I could work with you perhaps just as effectively after that first
Yeah.
meeting as you could with your co-founders, because it doesn't matter, as long as our internets are both working we can
Yeah.
talk, then it doesn't matter where people are. It's changed it a
Yeah.
lot. But obviously, you're still having that personal touch.
Yeah, still we do have the touch. I think getting into a garage mode is obviously it will help a lot, because we tried a hackathon mode when we had a little bit of holidays, and for a week or so, or maybe 3 to 4 days continuously, and it went pretty smooth. Like a lot of components we were able to build it in faster time than doing everybody working on their own timing and then bringing it back, so versus continuously working. Yeah, so that each has its own pros and cons. Yeah, like you mentioned, the industry has changed, the internet connectivity has enabled a lot of stuff, so yeah, it's on.
Ah, fantastic. So, what's the long term plans for Radical? How does that unfold as a product?
I think so. We tried pitching to few companies who would be interested or a potential customer for Radical. So the initial difficulty we have had with few companies was that we built only Java back in October November timeframe. We did not have Node or an SJS back then. And when we approached few companies, they were looking for Node and SJS. Obviously, we have baked in that, and then we have approached them back. The one difficulty what we have seen with Radical is that obviously it gets used when it's a brand new API which has to be developed, and if it's an existing API, I think that a lot of code exists. They might not even consider as a full-time solution for that problem statement. So we have been waiting, like how do we onboard them, at what point they feel that there is a need, and then we pitch in. So there are a few companies who have got the initial interaction with them, but we have to continue with them. So that's where the journey is. So we want to grow a Radical into in three worlds. For example, a lot of freelancers and build in public, a lot of founders are trying out these days. A lot of founders earlier used to start with, they were resistant of a low code tools historically. The big main reason being is that a low code tool is like a vendor lock-in, so you cannot switch away from that platform. And also when you hit advanced scenarios where the tool does not give you that option, then you are stuck there, you cannot continue the development there, and you start finding workarounds with a low code
Mhm.
tool. So for these reasons, enterprise have stayed away from low code tools for a longer time. So with Radical, the journey is twofold. You start with a low code solution, but when you see a difficulty, like you hit a download code or a upload to GitHub, which we want to develop at some point soon. So you get the source code. Now you can customize however you want. Okay. So this allows be it freelancers or enterprise companies to start developing their own APIs instead of getting stuck with some low code tools, which has a cost implications, or when it comes to advanced scenarios they get stuck in. So we see a scope for Radical in service based companies, product based companies, and a little bit of freelancers and people who are learning this API based developments. Obviously students, rather than they trying out so many tutorials, they come in here, try something, they get the source code and see, okay, this is what this can do, this is how it has to be done. So these are few of the workflows what we have been seeing. But yes, we want to target few companies and we want to make it a commercial product.
I suppose it's a tight niche, but then it's still the very diverse use cases, isn't it? Do you know, it's you have to be able to write code to use it, but then as long as you're writing code on a particular type of project, then it can benefit you when you're first starting out. It makes sense the markets you're targeting. So obviously, for an indie developer, that they're looking at perhaps a project that seems to be every 2 months or
Yeah.
so, they might be able to speed up to once a
Yeah.
month now. And obviously, for the freelancers, it's as a customer, I don't care how long that part of the
Yeah.
project takes, especially if it's a fixed cost project. It doesn't matter to me. So it's a good way to increase their margins,
Yeah.
isn't it? But you've mentioned like the low code solutions. So would this work with low code?
Yeah, if you start your journey with Radical.sh, so what we developed was, even a person who doesn't know much about coding, he can use our GUI to start with the components of API. So to give a big bit of background context on why on Radical around this. So historically, the development platforms are all based on IDE stuff, be it a editor of Vim based or even today VS Code IDE based. So for
Mm.
4 decades, we have been using a text area to start typing our code, and that's how we use it. But what happens with the text area is that so people do not know what to type, so that becomes a little bit of difficulty. Obviously, when you're presented with a combo box with a list of options, the even newbie can get started with it. So at Radical, what we ensured while building the UI is, except for a name, we shouldn't be having a text box or an input box. It all should be a select box so that a newbie can get started smoothly. Even a product owner should be able to build the first part of the API without waiting for a developer. So that was the initial thought
Okay.
process we had put in. And once you feel like you have built in that basic parts of the solution, then you can take the source code and you are free to customize. So that's when the IDE starts becoming very useful. So today we use IDE for everything. Our thought was like how much we can delay the IDE. Today we bring it on like a R0. How much of ours we can go away, start building without an IDE and then get to the IDE.
Okay. So it wouldn't work with Webflow or Flutterflow or anything like that. It's still very much your no code in the context that is
Yeah.
code.
So at present, Radical just gives you a download of the source code. You have to take your source code and still deploy it. Few months down the line, we will also give an option to publish your code to GitHub, and from GitHub, you can build a workflow which gets deployed to AWS or versa. Now, once you have your API getting deployed, you can use this API in any other low-code solutions, be it Retool or any other Builder.io, whatever the low-code tools which are available. You need not get stuck with any of the vendor. This low-code, because it's a code, you can deploy it on any cloud, any CI/CD. It's free. It's like you're free to do whatever you want with that code.
That makes sense. So in the future, I could say I'm going to use Radical, I'm going to use Superbase, and I'm going to use I don't know Webflow or something, and then all of a sudden I've got something that is very easy to design on the front end with Webflow, very easy to manage with Superbase, and then you've made it very easy to do the other parts that were next to impossible for
Yeah.
people. It'd be interesting when you've got there for the time saving for people, and perhaps as well for people like me. I come along and I've often had a tendency to think I can do
Yeah.
something because I've listened to the this is low code or this is no code. And I think I know my way around a bit of HTML and CSS, and I've seen PHP once before when I tried to build a plugin for WordPress, what seems to be 1,000 years ago
Yeah.
now. And you go through the process and you try to get it done, but you've enabled people now to say, and
Yeah.
actually, this is something that you can use to do that because I won't have that issue of me thinking this a type of way saying this can should be able to do this. And these are the options for the drop downs. It's keeping me guided and on
Yeah.
track. So I wouldn't build or try to build something that can be built. And then on the flip side, I wouldn't be building in technical depth from the beginning because I've avoided those simple
Exactly.
mistakes.
So that is one of the key
Yeah.
points a few of the companies called out, saying that this makes the solutions to come in a certain pattern by following the best practices. We will not be like creating the
Mhm.
tech debt. Another point what I wanted to stress upon is that you touched upon HTML and CSS, and HTML and CSS got in so much of popularity and people loved it. Is one reason is because they could see a component on a web page and they could see the source code of it, so they were able to find out how this button or how this component was built with what HTML and what CSS. This
Mhm.
openness allowed a lot of developers to build how do I achieve a similar effect. This take the source code, modify it, and then you are able to go open. Even a newbie can understand this. So with Radical, you choose the drop down and then you see the source code, then you understand, okay, this option is going to do this, and then you get a similar feel with that.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. It's an interesting product to start with, and then obviously as you go through, and the more you're able to develop it, the more feedback you get from potential customers and then existing
True.
customers. The more you're able to refine it to people's
True.
needs. It's interesting. I think the future of development, you've now reduced lowered the barriers a little bit for
Yeah.
people. I could, as you say, an indie developer, perhaps a second year student now could achieve something, saving the 30 to 60% at the beginning of a product that they couldn't have been able to do without a couple of years of experience. So it's really good.
Exactly.
So from there, it was more. Did you spend much time validating the idea with smaller people and things first, or just did you just know this solves our problem? We know that people are going to
Yeah.
want it.
I'm not a big fan of market validation because I'll quote Steve Jobs here. Like, people do not know what they want unless you build it and show it to them that this is the experience that can be changed. Because words cannot describe the experience, and it becomes very difficult. I'll stick to that philosophy, and but you cannot go with that philosophy. You have to see the ground reality whether this is practical or not. Right? So what we have seen is that with my initial journey on Radical always started with Java, because a lot of enterprises were always there. So there was a tool named Spring Initializer. That's an open source component built by Spring community, and that's the start point for any Spring Boot service where you get a basic skeleton and then an empty project. So you still have to go and add your own domain models, the controller services repository, and then you get it out. So my thought is that why would this product just generating the empty project? It just gives a skeleton, and it can give you a maybe a status API working like hello world kind of thing. So what if it can give me like 30% or 60%? That's where the journey started. Obviously, I was looking at a case study around this where Netflix had modified this Spring Initializer to as per their organization needs, and if they have to kickstart a API within their own org, because they were having like thousands of microservices. So if they have to add a new microservices, so they had this internal product where you can generate it along with more files, so it's going to save time. So this was one of the point of trigger that somebody is already doing it, which means we can do it for across a lot of companies. So that was the thought process.
I wouldn't have thought, obviously, from a consumer's perspective, I never thought Netflix ran numerous new services, perhaps thousands every year. I thought that was they've got the one core product and that's them. Then obviously it's from a coding perspective, you're perhaps thinking, how naive could you be? They've got billions of things that they're forever building for. So I suppose your validation came through a lot more market listening and then just combining that
Yeah.
plus your own experiences, didn't it? Yeah.
That was one part of the journey. I'll give you the two other parts of it. So we did some sort of internal validation. I gave it to few of my architects who have been work, so from whom I learned domain driven design and other stuff. I gave it to them for feedback. So they were like, so maybe I gave it in initial days and they were asking to add XYZ, but the product looks, the journey, you are eventually there, they're getting there. So they were giving the suggestions of what to add next, and that was one part of the journey. Another specific thing what I wanted to call out was when we started, the UI was not that cool. One of the feedback what came in for us was that irrespective of what the product can do, the UI of the product has to be as per the market standard. The UI tells that the product quality, although it's not true, but people, of a lot of people conceive that the quality of UI is the quality of the product. How,
Yeah.
how did we solve this problem? Because our UI was not looking that great. We just took a off the shelf bootstrap, and then we had, or off the shelf tailwind, and we had implemented a CSS and HTML, and that's how it was looking. We did not have a budget to hire a designer, so there is no scope for creating redoing the design from scratch, and it's not going to work.
Mm.
And second thought what we had was like, what if we can use something like a chat GPT or buy some pre-built templates from some marketplaces and we could stitch them. The problem with this was that each of the component would come with different UI output from ChatGPT or from something else. And how do you mix and match them? And you will spend a lot of time to assembling. And we came up with one on a different note. What is the source of all this problem? We thought through, and perhaps for a day I was spending with ChatGPT just prompting. I did not do any development. We were just prompting it, I wanted to find out a color which looks good, and I used all possible adjectives to find that color as shadow effect. Although the source code what came out was very close, but it gave us the right direction. We grabbed that piece of code and we modified it to get our UI. So basically, you can say that our UI was indirectly designed by ChatGPT, and we took the code and we overrated our existing style sheet with those specification. Maybe we did a code change of maybe 100 lines to 200 lines, and then the UI started appearing beautiful. So one quote what I want to call out is, you can use ChatGPT as a 2-year-old web developer or like a Picasso. The choice is yours. How do you want to prompt it and how do you want to use it? So we took a later part and it worked well for us. So we did not have a designer, but still
Yeah.
we were able to compensate.
I think, well, there's two things you said interesting. The first part about them not accepting the design, the second part obviously about you fixing it with chat. There's a lot of advice given today, which I think is quite, I don't want to say archaic, but perhaps a few years dated. Users' expectations of websites and apps
Mm,
now, from the design perspective, has changed a
definitely.
lot. Where I can remember the first version of PayPal I used, for example, and it was atrocious. When you go back to first versions of Facebook, example, they were pretty poor as well. But today, because these tools have gone on so far, we now have an expectation on the web and in apps. And this corporate client of yours who said no is perhaps an indication of things to come for a lot of people who think we can just go and code this and people will
Yeah.
accept it. But you do need a bit of design, and hopefully for other people, chat can use it. But if not, try and find somebody who can perhaps bring some design with other skill sets you might need as a
Yeah.
startup. But then chat, it's saved you from an embarrassing conversation with a designer saying we need to fix this, we don't know what to do. You guys are devs, you should know how to fix this. Yeah, I know. There's half the team might be colorblind. So from there, you've released on
Yeah.
Product Hunt. You've done incredibly well. Was it your first
Yeah, it
release?
was our first release in product.
Yeah, you came fourth on a day. Which was that your aspiration?
No, actually, we thought anywhere in top 10 should do good for us because these are like a little bit of developer centric tools. It's not like a wide, the target audience is relatively smaller than we anticipate because you use it, just sign up. It's a niche product, is what I felt. So getting to top 10 itself is a good
Mhm.
sign for us.
No, fantastic. Did you spend a lot of time preparing for it? Or did you just turn up on Monday and say, right, then Thursday, Friday, we release and that's it?
The lot of hard work has gone in the backstage. So if you get your product right, and if you get your UI right, and if you get your explainer video right, and the landing page right, so the work amount of work what you have to put in for explicitly for product hunt is very low. Maybe the timing you have to find through that, what part of screenshots goes in, how do you describe it, little bit of wordings, and then little bit of explainers videos. So if you have put in a lot of hard work to do the other parts, then launching is not that difficult.
Okay. No, fantastic. Did you get much traffic and things afterwards?
Yes, so with product hunt, what we have seen a pattern is that on those particular 2 days, so basically, if you're in top 4 or 5, I think you will get attention on 2 days. I think we launched on a Sunday, we got attention on Monday as well. So we got around 1,000 visits on that day. And then throughout this week, we have got around 250 signups, 250 users who have signed up for the product within this whole week, thanks to product hunt.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this has opened up a lot of audiences. So we have leads, we have signups from few companies with their official email IDs. So if it was a traditional marketing push for outbound call, you wouldn't have even reached them. So now this is like inbound
Mhm.
contact whom we have got now, and we are planning to reach out. So those are like a very qualified leads whom we can reach out.
It's fantastic. I suppose from there, does the product hunt badge on your website now help with the conversation for some of these companies you've wanted to speak to before?
Definitely. So product hunt has become like one of the standards, or so people take it like, okay, these many comments, and this is how users see the product. So uh, product hunt is not only giving the visibility; it has become like a kind of a score what how people see it.
So from there, you're going to be going back to product hunt a few times every time we've got a major update.
Yeah, so what we feel is that if there is a significant feature, what has to be shown to the user, for example, if the experience is going to save them the time, or it's going to give a wow factor, we felt going back to product hunt. So I think it may take few features may take months, or few feature may take weeks. So we want to have those wow effect moment to go back to product hunt.
Okay, so from there, it's like a late validator, early go to market type
Yeah.
tactic. Are you going to be knocking on doors to do this? Or are you going to be looking at AppSumos and other places for the next stage of traction for you?
So we have tried few other places before even coming to product, and we tried it on LinkedIn and Twitter, Reddit. So those mediums, we were not able to get the attention of what we wanted, but product hunt gave us that attention across. So obviously we can, LinkedIn is picking up stuff after the product hunt got popular, and we have got a lot of traction. So it depends on how the metrics turn out from other platforms. So we want to try it on few platforms and see what works for us. Depending on that one of the option, we can pick it up and move forward.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Depending on the type of tool, that platform can be successful. But I suppose there's a lot of other places that you can list which will
Definitely.
help get you backlinks and other
Yeah.
things. There's Top Tools is one that was released just the other day. I saw it on Product Hunt, and then a few other like beta lists and other places where at least you get some credibility back to your
Okay.
domain. But I suppose it's how do you target the developers, and perhaps it's longer term strategies, getting to them, as you were saying, whilst at university. So when they start at a company saying, this is the tool set I use, I'm not using that archaic thing. I want to use Radical because it saves me 60% of each
Yeah.
project. So obviously you've got a lot of things to figure out from there, but it's some good problems to try and solve.
Definitely. Yeah, we've signed up for a dev hunt. It's a developer focused product hunt, you can call it out. So it goes on a specific timeline. I think we have asked for a slot. I think the slot maybe is in June or something, or June or July, maybe. Yeah. So when it launches.
Yeah, I can see that they're playing the same thing there. So from there, is there anything else you wanted to add or discuss?
I think I'm good. Most of the stuff what we wanted to cover is already covered.
I'd say thank you for your time, Senthil, and we'll look at hopefully speaking to you again in the future to see how Radical's progressed and how it's perhaps you'll have some more case studies of some indie developers who've been able to go and build something, some freelancers and other
Definitely.
companies.
First of all, thanks a lot for giving us this opportunity to present, and it opens up a lot of things. Be it talking to you, and so that we can think through on what is next for the product, more on dog fooding stuff, and also it opens up like other people, like how they are thinking through what is their problems, how do we solve those use cases. So it means a lot to
Mhm.
us. Yeah, looking forward.
No, thank you for coming.